in the previous lecture, we started our discussion on the implementation of the activity-based costing. We saw how, according to the Plastem Corporation, they tried to analyze the business processes of their manufacturing process into different activities. First of all, they traced more direct costs. That means they reclassified the indirect costs and found out that part of the indirect costs could be traced effectively. Therefore, they reclassified this type of activity, or a specific activity, which is cleaning the molds. They reclassified this activity into a direct cost. The second thing, or the second step they did is, of course, according to their analysis, they increased the number of cost pools. And for each cost pool, they have chosen a cost driver that have a strong cause and effect relationship with the cost pool itself. These are the three steps, as we discussed earlier, that needs to be done in order to refine any costing system, whether, of course, we are using the ABC or if we are using any other costing system. These are the three steps that we need to go through in order to refine a costing system. And of course, we took an example, or we took a head start of how to implement the activity-based costing, and we took as an example the costs or the activity of setting up the machines or the molding machines. And of course, we said that the allocation base here was chosen as the setup hours, not the number of setups, and we discussed why. And we found out that according to our comparison between the new allocation and the previous allocation, that we have been overcosting the simple lengths, and we have undercosting, or we have been undercosting the complex lengths. As you can see here, the allocation was only the difference between the two, while as the total costs remained the same as we discussed in the last time. Therefore, who can tell me, of course, after going through the implementation here, this is the implementation of the ABC. So I want to ask you a question, or this following question. Is there a difference really between the activity-based costing and the simple costing? As we can see here, we determined the cost allocation base, and then we determined the costs of the activity, and then we calculated the cost allocation base, and then we allocated the cost. So what is the difference between the simple costing and the activity-based costing? Is there a difference? And if there is a difference, what is exactly the difference here? So what do you think? Go ahead.
How we allocate the resources.
How we allocate the resources. Do you mean the method? Here, did the method change? If we can recall from Cost Accounting 1 that the steps are exactly the same. That means the method that we are using is the same. First, we need to determine the cost allocation base. The second, we need to determine the cost of this cost allocation base, or the cost that is related to this cost allocation base. And then step number 3, we need to determine the budgeted allocation rate. And then step number 4, the allocation process itself. Therefore, as we can see, the method is the same. But what was the main difference here? What was the refinement here in the use of the activity-based costing?
Maybe because the symbol use more direct labor hours.
You mean that the simple costing system only used one?
More.
the simple costing system. This is the ABC. Therefore, the simple costing system only used a one allocation base in order to allocate all the indirect costs. Correct? But here in the ABC, they did not only use, or they did not only classify one cost allocation base, but did classify 6 different allocation bases. Correct? Which is the difference between the simple costing and the activity-based costing. This is the only difference. As we can see here, these are the different activities that has been analyzed according to the analysis of the costing system, or according to the analysis of the production processes within this organization. As we can see here, we came up with 7 different activities. One of them was reclassified as direct. Therefore, we ended up with 6 different activities. That means with 6 different cost allocation bases. That means with 6 different cost pools. This is the only difference. The method of allocation is the same. The steps, as we saw, as I just said, are the same. There are no differences. But only the difference comes from that the activity-based costing analyzes the processes into different activities. Therefore, they analyze the indirect costs into more indirect cost pools. While as in the simple costing system, they take a broad look. They take a broad analysis of the costing system. They do not analyze each and different activity, and they do not go through the different processes within the organization. They only take it from an average, from, let us say, a broad perspective. While as in the activity-based costing, they dig deeper within the processes in order to analyze these processes into different activities. Therefore, this is one of the differences between the activity-based costing and the simple costing. It is not, or the difference or the differentiation is not on how we allocate, but on how we determine our cost allocation basis. That is the difference between the two. Any questions? All right. As we can see, in our allocation method of the setup costs, we saw that we have chosen an allocation base that is according to a batch, not according to individual number of units. Why? Because according to our experience, according to our knowledge of the processes or the setting up processes here, or this activity in particular, we know that we incur costs, or we perform the setting up of the machines not after individual production of units, but we incur these costs after the production of a group of individual products. Therefore, the cost allocation base here was considered according to the batches, not according to the number of units or individual units of or this specific product or service. Any questions? Therefore, we can now take a look on the cost hierarchies that can be used by an activity-based costing system. Of course, first of all, what do we mean by cost hierarchies? It is a classification of activities. It is the classification of cost allocation bases. It is the classifications of the different cost pools. This is what we mean by the cost hierarchies. Therefore, another difference here between an activity-based costing and the simple costing is that the simple costing emphasizes the use of unit level allocation basis, while as the activity-based costing emphasizes on the unit level as well as batch level, as well as a product sustaining, as well as facility sustaining, which is exactly the point that we have just said right now, which is the difference between the simple costing and the activity-based costing. Therefore, as we can see here, the simple costing only emphasizes on the unit level. That means that the simple costing only considers the cause and effect relationship between the cost and the cost driver on a unit level, and that's it. Sometimes this would have a good cause and effect relationship with the cost itself. Sometimes. But other times, as we saw here in the number of setups, or the setup costs, as we can see here, the more or the stronger cause and effect relationship was not according to the number of units or individual units, or it was not according to the unit level, but it was according to what? To the batch level. Therefore, here comes the superiority of the activity-based costing. That means that the activity-based costing here tries to choose the better allocation base according to these different cost hierarchies. Therefore, let us now start our discussion of the different cost hierarchies and what do we mean, and of course the examples of each cost hierarchy. First of all, ABC uses a 4-level cost structure to determine how far down the production cycle cost should be pushed. As we can see here, there is the unit level, there is the batch level, there is the product sustaining level, and there is the facility sustaining level. First of all, what do we mean by the unit level? From its term, unit level. Yes?
Are the cost of activity that will form on each individual of service?
Excellent, excellent. Therefore, the unit level are the costs of activities that are related to individual units of a product or service. That means that each product, that each service that is produced would consume up more costs at the unit level. Therefore, the relationship here between the cost and the number or the individual number of units of the product or service. Who can give us an example on a unit level or an output unit level cost? Cost of energy. Excellent. Excellent. The consumption of energy by the machines. Because as we all know, if the number of units that is produced increases, that means that the machine hours that is used in the production process would also increase. Increasing the machine hours would definitely increase our consumption of energy. Therefore, energy costs, excellent, are an example of unit level costs. What else? Excellent. Depreciation. What else? Repairs or maintenance. Excellent. Therefore, as we can see, the energy costs, the machinery depreciation, and the maintenance or the repairs of these machines are all related to the number of machine hours that is used. And of course, the number of machine hours increases or decreases as the number of units of a specific product increases or decreases. Therefore, these are different examples of the unit level costs. Any questions? Now, let us go to the second level or the second classification of the cost hierarchies that could be used in an activity-based costing. Of course, we are not saying here that any activity-based costing needs to have these different four classifications, but the classifications would fall onto one or more of these four. So, what do you mean by the second cost hierarchy, which is the batch level?
Cost of activities are related to group of units of product or services rather than individual.
Excellent, excellent. Therefore, at the unit level, we said that these costs or the costs of activities that are related to individual units of a product or service. While as here at the batch level, as we just saw, according to the setup costs, that these costs are related not to individual units, but to a group of units. This is considered a batch level. Of course, we found out, according to the Plasm Corporation case, that the setup costs are a batch level costs. What else? What other examples that could be a batch level cost?
Number of hours.
Number of hours. Number of hours of what?
Set of hours.
Yani, of course, the cost hierarchy, from its name, we are considering the classifications of costs, not the allocation basis. Therefore, the energy costs, the depreciation costs, the maintenance costs, the setup costs. We are here classifying the cost of activities themselves, not the allocation basis that are being used. Excellent, excellent. As we all know, that we receive materials according to what? To the purchase orders. And we, or let us say, the purchase orders here are in batches. Because, of course, we do not receive individual units each at a time. We receive a batch, a group of units when we purchase or when we order a specific raw material, for instance. Therefore, let us say the purchase cost or the material, let us say inspection costs, the material handling, and of course also the payment of our purchases. All, for instance, the material inspection costs, when we purchase any materials, before we collect these materials and before entering these materials into our warehouses, we need to have inspection. We need to inspect these materials in order to make sure that these materials were the materials that have been ordered according to the specifics, according to the specifications that we have ordered, and so on. Therefore, the material inspection cost here is a batch level cost, because this cost is according or can be or is related to the purchase orders themselves, or the number of purchase orders. And we all know that the purchase order is a batch level because we do not order individual units of materials, for instance. Also, the material handling, the transfer of materials from the warehouses onto the production process, which is the material handling cost. Of course, we do not transfer individual units of materials from the warehouses to the production process. We move or transfer these materials in batches, in groups, correct? Therefore, the number of transfers would be the cost of or the cost allocation base here for the material handling. All these bases for these costs would be a batch level cost. Any questions? Let us go down to the third, product sustaining level costs. What do you mean by product sustaining level costs? Go ahead.
Product sustaining or service sustaining cost, the cost that undertaking to support the individual product rather than the number of units.
Excellent, excellent. Therefore, this type of costs is related in the support of a specific product, and it is not related to the individual units that is produced, and also is not related to the group of units that is being produced by for a specific product or service. That means that this cost is only supporting, giving support to the product as a whole, regardless of the number of units that is being produced. For instance, designing the product. Design costs. If we are designing a product, I'm designing the product itself, the product line itself, regardless of how many number of units that is going to be produced. That means if we are going to produce less number of units or more number of units, that would not affect by any way our design costs. Correct? Therefore, in this case, the design costs is related to support this product and should be, of course, allocated to this product according to a certain allocation base. For instance, the complexity of the design, for instance, and so on.
Marketing costs.
Like the marketing costs, excellent.
Research and development.
R&D, excellent. And so on. All are product sustaining costs. Now, let us go to the last hierarchy or last classification, which is the facility sustaining level.
The activity, the cost of activity that cannot be placed to individual but support the organization.
Excellent, excellent. Therefore, the facility sustaining level are the costs of the activities that are not related to a specific product or to a specific service. But these costs support the processes of the whole organization as administration costs. Of course, the administration cost or the administrative cost could not be related to a specific product or a specific service, but it can be related to the processes of the whole organization. These costs would support the whole organization or the organization as a whole. Of course, the administrative cost comes, of course, into different classifications. The rents, the salaries of the management, the compensation for, let us say, the secretary, the legal support, the accounting support, and so on. Therefore, the administrative support as a whole could not be traced to a specific number of, or individual number of units could not be, let us say, related or traced to a group of units, and also it cannot be traced to a specific product. Therefore, it is a facility sustaining. That means it gives support or it sustains the processes within the facility or the organization. Any questions? Now, let us go to the implementation. Of course, after these hierarchies, we need to continue our implementation of the activity-based costing within the Plastem Corporation. We only saw one activity cost pool and how they allocated this activity cost pool onto the different products, which is the S3 and the CL5. Now let us go through all the costing system, all, let us say, the different cost allocation bases, the different cost pools, and how did they trace the different direct costs. So as we can see here, this is the diagram that illustrates the costing system according, of course, to the activity-based costing system in Plastem Corporation. As we can see here, the direct materials were not changed because they were direct before and they are still direct. There is no differences here. We have the direct manufacturing labor, also no differences. And here, as we can see, we added a new direct cost, which is the mold cleaning and maintenance. Therefore, now we have three different types of costs or direct costs that can be traced in a cost-effective way to the S3 and the CL5 products. Of course, we are going to go through the same steps that we took in Cost Accounting 1. What are these 7 steps? Step number 1, as we can see here, we need to determine the cost object. Step number 2, trace the different direct costs to the different cost objects. And as we can see here, the number became 3 direct costs instead of 2 direct costs. This is because, or this is the result of the refinement that has been done in the Plastem Corporation costing system. Step number 3. Excellent. Step number 3, we need to determine the cost allocation basis. And we said that this determination is according to the analysis of the processes into different activities. Therefore, we analyze the business processes into different activities, and then we go to the determination of the cost allocation basis to these different activities. Correct? And then, as we can see here, there are different allocation bases. Of course, for each activity cost pool, there would be an activity cost allocation base. This is step number 3. Step number 4, determining the cost pools. According to the allocation bases here, or 6 allocation bases, we would have 6 different activities or activity cost pools: the design, the molding setup machinery, or the setting up of the machinery, the molding operations, the molding machine operations, the shipment setup, the distribution activity, and the administrative activity. All have different, as we can see, allocation bases. Because if we have 2 with the same allocation base, it could be grouped into or onto one activity. Of course, after determining the allocation base and determining the cost pool, the step number 5 is calculating or determining the cost allocation base, which is according to the equation that we know, cost pool, or the costs of the cost pool or the activity cost pool divided by the number of units of the different allocation bases. Therefore, step number 5, as we can see here, we determined the different cost allocation bases for the different activities or activity cost pools. Of course, after determining the cost allocation basis, we need to allocate or start with the allocation of these indirect cost pools onto the different products and services that we have. In this case, to the two products, the CL5 and the S3. Of course, step number 7, which is the last step, we need to add the direct costs that have been traced and add the indirect costs that have been allocated in order to calculate or determine the total cost of the cost object. Therefore, as we can see here, the method of this costing system, which is the ABC, or the activity-based costing system, is the same as the simple costing system. It is the same steps. The method did not change. The only change here is that the analysis of the production processes and the manufacturing processes yielded a more accurate indirect cost pools, yielded a more accurate cost allocation basis. Therefore, it would yield a more accurate cost or cost allocation to the indirect cost to the different products. Any questions? Of course, as we can see here, this is the information, or this is the type of information that would be given in any question. And according to this information, we would calculate the costs or allocate the costs of the different activities or the different activity cost pools. As we can see here, we have 6 different activities, as we said. The first is the design. Of course, as we can see here, the cost hierarchy of the design, as we just said, is a product sustaining, because as we can see here, the design cost would not change according to the change in the number of units or the number of individual units. And it also would not change according to the change in the number of batches. But it is related to a specific product, therefore it is a product sustaining. And then they gave us the total budgeted indirect cost. What is the total budgeted indirect cost? This is the cost pool. Of course, step number 3, the budgeted quantity of the allocation base, which is the number of units of the allocation base, which is in this case 100, for instance. Of course, in step number 5, as we can see, they calculated the allocation base or the allocation rate, according to these two pieces of information, according to the cost pool and according to the number of units of the allocation base. And of course, this goes on for the setup of molding machines also. It is a batch level, as we saw earlier. The machine operations, it is a unit level or an output unit level, because as we can see here, the machine operations costs would increase or decrease as the number of individual units increases or decreases. Therefore, it would be allocated according to an output unit level cost allocation base. Shipment setup. The shipments is also a batch level, because we do not ship, let us say, individual units, but we ship batches of these units, groups of these units. Distribution, it is an output unit level. The cost of distribution here is according, let us say, of the area that is used up by the product itself. Therefore, as we can see here, if the unit uses up more and more of the space, that means we are going to incur more and more distribution costs. Therefore, this distribution cost would increase or decrease according to the individual number of units that have been shipped. Correct? Because as the number of units increases, we need more area in order to ship these products. Therefore, this is considered an output unit level cost pool. The last activity, or the final activity here, is the administration. From the term, we can say that the administration is not related to the CS3, is not related to the CL5, but it is related to the whole organization in sustaining the processes of the whole organization. Therefore, this is a facility sustaining a cost pool or cost hierarchy. Any questions? Of course, the next step would be the allocation and the determination of the costs or the different costs, direct and indirect, and adding up these costs in order to determine the costs of the S3 and the CL5. As we can see here, we have three different direct costs. Therefore, they added up the direct costs, and they found out that the direct cost for the simple lenses, for the production of 60,000 units of the simple lenses, is 1,845,000. And then the next step would be the allocation of the indirect costs, according, of course, to the allocation rates that have been calculated previously. Therefore, here we allocated the cost of the design onto the S3 and onto the CL5. The same thing for the setup of molding machines. We allocated the costs onto the S3 and onto the CL5, and this goes through until we end up with the total indirect costs. Of course, after allocating all the indirect cost pools, we can end up with the total indirect cost that is allocated to a specific product. Now, the last step, or step number 7, we need to add up the direct costs with the allocated indirect costs in order to determine the cost of the product or a specific product or service. As we can see here, the cost according to the activity-based costing for the S3 is 49.98, while as for the complex lenses it is 132.07. Of course, we have been selling the CL5 according to $137. Correct? This was the price before refining the costing system. And we have been selling the simple lenses by the amount of $63. Of course, there was a competitor that used to ask for a $53. As we can see here, that according to the activity-based costing, that we have been over-costing our S3, and according to the cross-subsidization that we discussed earlier, we have been also under-costing our CL5. That means that over-costing the S3 would it make it seem that we are not making that much profit than it actually produces, while as the CL5 would seem more profitable than it really is. As you can see here, the difference between 132 and 137 is only $5 or less than $5 because of the 0.5 7. Therefore, as we can see here, the profitability has decreased when we used a more accurate costing system. While as here, the difference between the 63 and the 49 is, let us say, $13. Therefore, the profitability of the F3 would substantially improve. Correct? Of course, after using this refined costing system. So now, we as the managers of Plastem Corporation, can we sell our product and match the competitor price of $53? Of course we can. Because as we can see here, that according to the costing system, we found out that really the S3 costs us to produce this product, of course, $49 or $50. Therefore, we can sell and attain a profit also the S3 by the amount or by the price of $53. Any questions? Therefore, this is the activity-based costing, and this is the implementation of the activity-based costing. Of course, they give us a summary of comparisons between the two systems for Plastem Corporation, the simple and the activity-based costing. Of course, we went through these different points, but let us go through quickly these points again. Direct cost categories in the simple costing was only 2, while as in the ABC was refined into 3 direct costs. That means this decreased the amount of indirect costs and increased the amount of direct costs, which means it increased the accuracy of this costing system. Also, the total indirect cost pools. The indirect cost pools for the simple costing was only 1. All indirect costs were allocated according to only one allocation base, using a broad averaging factor. Because here in the simple costing, they took or they analyzed, or they did not analyze actually the processes, but they considered the processes or the manufacturing processes from a wide, let us say, perspective. They did not dig deep, they did not analyze the different processes and the different activities within this corporation or organization. But in the activity-based costing, they did just that. They analyzed the business processes, they dug deeper in order to find out that they have 6 different cost pools or indirect cost pools with 6 different allocation bases. Of course, as we can see here, this is what we call cross-subsidization. The simple lens was overcosted by the amount of $526,047, while as the complex lens was undercosted by the same amount. Because here we have only 2 products, and according to the cross-subsidization, we said if we have one product that is undercosted or overcosted, that means we will have 1 or more products that are undercosted or overcosted. But here we have only 2. That means if one of these 2 products are undercosted, the other would be overcosted by the same amount. This or these numbers would explain the cross-subsidization that we explained earlier. Any questions? So, what do we conclude? After seeing or after experiencing the refinement of the costing system using the activity-based costing. First of all, each method is correct, is mathematically correct. Then each method yields a different cost figure which will lead to different gross margin calculations. Of course, the only difference here between the different costing systems is the way we allocate the indirect costs and the way we allocate and classify direct and indirect costs. This is the only difference between the simple costing and the activity-based costing. Therefore, as we can see here, the difference or the different allocation methods that is used in the different methods would yield different cost figures. But the total cost, as we said, will stay the same. Because the way we allocate these methods does not affect by any way, by any means, the total cost. The total cost will stay the same. The only difference here, that the allocation onto the different products would change. Therefore, the cost of the different products would definitely change. Only overhead is involved. Why only overhead is involved? Because the problem lies within the allocation process. The problem of inaccuracy, as we said, lies within the method that we use in order to allocate the different indirect cost pools. Therefore, the refinement of the simple costing and the using of the activity-based costing only took into consideration, only focused upon, only emphasized upon the overhead and only involved the overhead. Correct? Because the direct costs are direct and can be traced in a cost-effective way. Therefore, this tracing of direct costs is accurate. We do not have any problems in the direct costs. But the problem lies within the indirect cost pools. At last, the selection of the appropriate method and drivers should be based on experience, industry practices, as well as a cost-benefit analysis of each option under consideration. This is exactly what we said according to our discussion throughout this chapter. Of course, this is correct for the simple costing and also is correct for the activity-based costing and any other costing system. We need to choose, as we said in Cost Accounting 1, we need to choose the cost allocation base according to our experiences, according to the industry practices, and of course according to the benefit analysis or the cost-benefit analysis, which is one of the most factors that need to be considered in choosing our cost allocation basis. Any questions? So, now, when do you think an organization needs to refine its costing system? Of course, we said the use of the activity-based costing is one of the tools to refine the costing system. Some organizations would say that, okay, activity-based costing is more superior than the simple costing system, but according to the cost-benefit analysis, the use of the activity-based costing would incur us more cost than the benefits of this use. Therefore, we will not use the activity-based costing. Correct? Therefore, we need to understand when do we need to refine our costing system, whether by using the activity-based costing or by any other means. So, what are the factors that could give us a hint that we need to have or we need to refine our costing system? Excellent. When we have high competition or when we are operating in a highly competitive market, as we just saw in Plastem Corporation. If Plastem Corporation was only the organization, or was the only organization that produces the S3 and the CL5 within this market, therefore it can overcost, it can overprice, and we would not have any problems. Why? Because we are the only ones operating in this market. But as the competition increases, that means we might have other competitors that would understand, or that would have more superior costing systems, which would give them the advantage of having a highly competitive costs, or highly, let us say, competitive prices. Therefore, as the competition increases, we would need a more accurate costing system in order to have a competitive advantage, in order to have the ability to compete against other competitors or other organizations within the same market. What else? We said that we have two factors that we need to consider between the trade-off, between the complexity, as you can remember, and the more accuracy, or let us say the less accuracy, or the simplicity of the costing system. What are these two factors?
When the indirect cost is very high, and when the product is very diverse.
Excellent. Therefore, as the product diversity increases, or the number of products that is being produced, or that is produced from this organization increases, that means we need a more accurate costing system in order to allocate these costs accurately onto the different costs. Because as the number of products increases, that means that our inaccuracy, of course, in using the simple costing system would also increase. Therefore, as the product diversity increases, inaccuracies by using simple costing or broad averaging would increase. Therefore, we need to have a more accurate costing system in order to produce more accurate cost determinations or cost measurements of different cost objects. Also, the percentage or the materiality of indirect costs. We said that as the materiality of indirect costs increases, that means any small error or any small margin of error would affect largely our records, would affect largely our decision-making process, or our decision-making ability. Therefore, if we have an increase in the indirect costs, for instance, by the use of a new technology or automated production and so on, that means we need to go into, or we need to go from a simple costing system onto a more refined costing system. We are not saying that we always need to use the ABC. This is a quite important point to always remember. We are not saying that the refinement of a costing system always comes by the use of the ABC. As we just said, that we might have a situation that using the ABC would incur us more costs than the benefits of this use. Therefore, we need to have this cost-benefit analysis in order to choose the best method in order to refine our costing system, whether to use the ABC or use the simple costing system, but refine it according to the three steps that we discussed earlier. Any questions? This would be all for today. This is the end of chapter number 5, or the activity-based costing chapter. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next lecture, inshallah.